Jaehaerys Targaryen, second of his name, was the 16th king in Targaryen history, and this is a 17th video in my Targaryen King series, in which I explore and analyze the reigns of each king in the Targaryen dynasty. Jaehaerys ruled Westeros for only 3 years, from 259 to 262 AC. He was born in 225, during the reign of his grandfather Mycor. Jaehaerys was the second of 5 children produced by Aegon V and Betha Blackwood. I discussed bits of Jaehaerys' youth in my Aegon video, but I'll cover it here too, for those who haven't seen it. Jaehaerys was sickly all his life, pale of skin and frail of bones. He had big purple eyes above those gaunt cheeks. He wore a silky beard, a tired smile, and a cape draped over his left arm. Most likely, this was just a fashion choice. In George Martin's official description, he simply notes an arm was concealed by the cape. If Jaehaerys had a specific injury or deformity he wanted to obscure from public view to appear a more foreboding king, Martin probably would have specified which arm he covered. Regardless, because we know Jaehaerys was frail, I theorize that he had osteoporosis, a disorder marked by low bone mass and deteriorating bone tissue, which makes them easier to break, and thus frail. So maybe Jarry broke his left flipper, it never healed properly, and he keeps it hidden with a cape. From a very young age, Jaehaerys was in love with his little sister Shaera. They were only 1 year apart, so that's fine, but it was incest. Their father, Aegon V, wanted to do away with House Targaryen's penchant for sibling incest, but that only made Jarry and Shaera more intent on marrying each other and having incest babies. So they did that. In 240 AC, when Jaehaerys was 15 and Shaera was 14, they got secretly married like the first Jaehaerys and his sister Alysanne. By the time Aegon found out, Shaera had already jumped her brother's sickly bones and consummated the marriage with sex, so they got to stay married. Jaehaerys was supposed to marry Celia Tully, and Shaera was supposed to marry Luther Tyrell and become the future Lady of Highgarden. And these two alliances would have helped their father a ton with his struggle in making the Lords of Westeros adhere to his social reforms. Clearly, Jarry was more interested in his sister's hot bod than helping his father stabilize the realm. At this point, his older brother Duncan had already married Jenny of Oldstones and forsaken his heirship to the Iron Throne. Jaehaerys was the future king when he married Shaera, so he goofed up pretty bad maybe. In 244, their first child Aerys was born. How cute and not insane he must have been. Then Rhaella came a year or 2 later. We know just about nothing that goes on in Jaehaerys' life during his early adulthood, except that a woods witch, who was the ghost of Highheart, a friend of Jaehaerys' sister-in-law Jenny, told him that the prince that was promised would be born from Aerys and Rhaella's line. So he demanded that his children get incestuously married, just like he did, and King Aegon gave in. Aegon's lack of spine in controlling Jaehaerys' whims helped cause not only the tragedy of Summerhall, but doomed Rhaella to a life of abuse by her brother Aerys. Save her, Jaime. Save her, you golden fool. Summerhall happened in 259 AC. Jaehaerys and Shaera survived, their children Aerys and Rhaella survived, and Rhaella gave birth to their grandson Rhaegar out in the grass while Summerhall was burning. King Aegon did not survive, so Jaehaerys ascended the Iron Throne at the age of 34. As soon as he donned his grandfather Mycor's iron-spiked crown, Jaehaerys was at war. The Band of Nine was an unholy alliance of outlaws, exiles, pirates, and sellswords who gathered in the disputed lands during the end of Aegon V's reign. They planned to wage war across the world until each of them had a kingdom of their own. Jaehaerys' brother, Prince Duncan, remarked that crowns were being sold 9 a penny, and thus the Band of Nine became the Ninepenny Kings. Here are their names. Note that Samaro San was an ancestor of Salador San, Davos' pirate buddy, and Maelys the Monstrous was not only the captain of the Golden Company, but the last known male in the Blackfyre line. So the War of the Ninepenny Kings was really the 5th and final Blackfyre Rebellion. Maelys was huge, and suffered craniopagus parasiticus, meaning he had a second head growing from his neck about the size of a fist. In the established canon, Maelys' deformed neckhead and his kinslaying of his cousin Daemon were the reasons he was nicknamed the Monstrous. However, thanks to some great investigative research done by a Reddit user named GSteph, who visited Texas A&M's Cushing Library and read through a bunch of George Martin's old drafts and letters, we have some additional Maelys lore. Of course, everything I'm about to say was scrapped, and thus cannot be considered canon, but I think it's awesome, so here we go. You know that part of Dance where Tyrion and Haldon teach young Griff about Volantis? Originally, this history lesson included Maelys Blackfyre. Maelys devoured his own brother in the womb, so the deformity on his neck is actually his twin. He was so fearfully strong that he could uproot a small tree with one hand. He was so strong that to kill his cousin Daemon, Maelys snapped his head clean off his shoulders. Maelys had a son whom he also kinslayed because he read some Valyrian scrolls gifted to him by Samaro San. These scrolls mentioned king's blood being able to awaken stone dragon eggs, so he burned his son Maenor alive to get a dragon. Didn't work though. After the Ninepenny Kings sacked Tyrosh and took the Stepstones, they turned their eyes on Westeros. In a one-on-one Targaryen versus Blackfyre battle, surely Jaehaerys would have lost. His father Aegon was a fine warrior, as was his older brother Duncan, and his little brother Daeron was a famously gifted knight, but they were all dead. Only Jaehaerys and Aerys remained. Jaehaerys was present at the short-lived Fourth Blackfyre Rebellion, but he was 11 and I doubt he saw any combat. What Jaehaerys lacked in physical capability, he made up for in bravery and brains. Except his insistence on marrying Shera and making his kids marry each other. That was dumb. Anyways, Jaehaerys gathered up his bannermen and decided to take their armies to the Stepstones on the offensive, rather than wait for the Ninepenny Kings to invade mainland Westeros. He even offered to lead the attack himself, but Ormond Baratheon dissuaded him of such delusions. The War of the Ninepenny Kings raged bloody on the Stepstones for almost the entirety of 260 AC. Ormond Baratheon died early, so command was given to a young Sir Gerald Hightower, Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, the White Bull, whose life ended at the Tower of Joy. Lots of characters from the main series, like Tywin and Kevan Lannister, Brynden Tully the Blackfish, and even Prince Aerys, became famous during the War of the Ninepenny Kings. The war's true hero, however, was young Barristan Selmy, who killed Maelys Blackfyre in single combat on the battlefield, and sent the rest of the Eightpenny Kings scrambling back east. Jaehaerys II's reign was thus secured. Lots of stuff was happening in the background of the war. Tywin, Steffon, and Aerys became best friends. Tywin became battle-hardened, and after the death of his uncle Jason, he was angry at his weak, lousy father Tytos for sitting the war out with his mistress while the other Westermen fought and died. This would culminate in the Rhaen-Tarbeck Rebellion a year later. Lord Baelish, Littlefinger's father, befriended Hoster Tully, which led to Hoster warding Peter at Riverrun, which is how he befriended Catelyn and Lysa. Jon Arryn befriended Rickard Stark and Steffon Baratheon, which led to Jon warding Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon in the Eyrie, and hints at the Southern Ambitions theory as well. After the war, we read that King Jaehaerys reconciled the crown with the houses who were upset with his father Aegon V's social reforms. While we don't get any specifics, it's nice to know Jaehaerys was capable of mopping up a mess that he certainly didn't help his father not to create. But to be fair, this does seem like a big achievement for Jaehaerys, since he was able to placate his lords while also not repealing his father's reforms. Those laws didn't get repealed until Tywin and Aerys. I do think we overlook the extent of King Jerry's power. When was the last time in Westerosi history that all 7 kingdoms united under one king to face a common enemy? Dorne, the Reach, and the Stormlands all fought together, when for so much of their history, these kingdoms were at each other's throats. Lord Quelon Greyjoy led the Iron Fleet against the Ninepenny Kings, and the Westerlands, North, Riverlands, and Vale all combined forces and fought together. At the end of the war, Westeros was united under King Jaehaerys, setting aside their infighting to stave off a foreign threat. What else could Jaehaerys have accomplished with all 7 kingdoms reveling in their own victory? He could have annexed the Stepstones permanently, establishing a garrison co-led by Dorne, the Stormlands, and maybe the Velaryons, giving Westeros dominance over all trade in the Narrow Sea. And if Jaehaerys was a more power-hungry king, the Free Cities should have been very scared of him. For this brief moment, Jaehaerys II was one of the most powerful men in Targaryen history. He didn't have a dragon, but he had the loyalty of 7 entire kingdoms. He fulfilled Aegon the Conqueror's dream of Westeros becoming one. It's also worth noting that Jaehaerys' Hand of the King, Lord Edgar Sloane, was an old and very cautious man, so it wasn't in either his or Jaehaerys' character to take advantage of their newfound nationwide coalescence. Barristan Selmy thought fondly of King Jaehaerys, but Jaehaerys is also directly responsible for misinforming millions of people who haven't read the books and who truly believe every Targaryen has a 50% chance of going insane. Barristan tells Daenerys, "But every child knows that the Targaryens have always danced too close to madness. Your father was not the first. King Jaehaerys once told me that madness and greatness are two sides of the same coin. Every time a new Targaryen is born," he said, "the gods toss the coin in the air and the world holds its breath to see how it will land." George writing this line in like 1998 started a domino effect that led to Tyrion Lannister supporting slave masters because Dany killing them hinted at being secretly Targaryenly insane.
Everywhere she goes, evil men die, and we cheer her for it.
In 262 AC, Jaehaerys II died at the age of 37, in just the 3rd year of his promising reign. The book says he was bedridden with a short illness, which included shortness of breath, which is about the vaguest possible way of describing the death of a king. We know that Jarry was sort of sick his whole life. That's just how he was described. So maybe he died of pneumonia. Or, to theorize wildly, because Fire and Blood Volume 2 is like 5th at most on George's list of things to do, maybe Aerys II killed him with poison. Aerys was an arrogant jerk in his youth, and he had all sorts of crazy aspirations as soon as he became king, like making a 2nd capital for all the clean white people only. So perhaps he killed Jaehaerys to quicken his own ascent. Aerys also seemed bitter about his father forcing him to marry his sister Rhaella, who he cheated on constantly. We also know that in his later years, when Aerys was fully insane, he was paranoid that his son Rhaegar was conspiring to murder him. Could Aerys' paranoia stem from the fact that he himself murdered his father to take the throne, so he jumps to the same conclusion with his own son? Maybe, I don't know. Lastly, we know the existence of Jaehaerys II is very important to George R.R. Martin. These two genius screenwriters accurately predicted that the Game of Thrones audience was too brain-dead to comprehend more than 2 generations of Targaryen history at one time. So Maester Aemon tells Jon in Season 1 that the Mad King was the son of Aegon V, thus erasing Jaehaerys from HBO canon. George insisted that Miguel Sapochnik and Ryan Condal replace Jaehaerys II into HBO canon. Why? Probably just because Martin doesn't like when things get changed for seemingly no good reason. They can become toxic butterflies. Or maybe George is planning for HBO to adapt Robert's Rebellion. Fans have requested this series for many years, even though I think it's somewhat pointless. But if they do it, they might want to include Jaehaerys II in Season 1 as a sort of lead-up to the Civil War, like Season 1 of House of the Dragon. By the way, if they're willing to retcon Arthur Dayne and make him use the real Dawn instead of wielding 2 swords like a Sith Lord because ooh, visual storytelling, that would make a Robert's Rebellion series justifiable to me. Let me know down in the comments how underrated you think Jaehaerys II was. Should he get more praise? Was he murdered too soon? Thanks for watching and subscribing.